Jump complete. Number 1, give me status report. Systems across all fleet are green, Admiral. Linking to local sensor network, and there is Yanari fleet still at their jump point. According to Phalanx data, they haven't moved at all since their arrival. Understood. So it seems they really do just want to pass through. I wonder why. Never mind. Proceed with the plan. I want all captains linked to my conference room in 5. Acknowledged. Messages sent. If you don't mind me asking, Admiral, are you really willing to go through with your plan? I don't expect our captains will be too happy about it. They don't have to like the plan, number 1. They have to follow it. Now get this fleet organized. Aye, aye, ma'am. Attention all crews. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. I repeat, all hands to battle stations. All ships are to hold position until further notice. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to Chetra's system. As you clearly have noticed, Yanari fleet is already here, just as we expected. What we have not expected, though, is the fact that they really seem to just be moving across our territory. Nonsense, Admiral. They haven't traveled all the way here just to disappear into Zrakan space. There must be some motive behind their actions, but we should not wait around to find what it is. The enemy is within reach, exposed. We should move out immediately and destroy them before they have a chance to enact their plans, whatever they may be. We're not going to do that, Commodore. After analyzing all available data, I've decided to move Manticore into orbit of New Beginning, but aside from that, we're not going to take any actions against Yanari fleet. Do I understand you correctly, Admiral? These beasts have invaded home system of my people, and you just want to let them do whatever they wish? Commodore Ironbark, I understand that enemy presence here is difficult for you, but the truth of our situation is undeniable. If we proceed with my plan, we can ensure that your homeworld is safe. But if we attack now, we're all probably going to die. And before you start asking questions, let me explain. Look at this map. It was made in cooperation with Counterintelligence Division and Phalanx monitoring stations. Ever since Yanari fleet entered our space, it was strictly monitored, so we knew their every move. And now, take a look at this map. It shows all energy spikes monitored within our territory during last year. Can you see the discrepancy? Yes, there seem to be several spikes in empty systems. I assume it means something important. You assume correctly, Commodore. These spikes are a clear indication of fleet movement. However, those systems never saw much traffic, even during peacetime, so the answer is obvious. Whoever is moving through these systems is not on our side, and if not for the vigilance of Phalanx operators, we would have never picked that up. Long story short, I expect our enemies have prepared an ambush. They sent their fleet ahead in hopes of convincing us to attack them. As soon as we would do so, however, those hidden fleets would enter the scene and attack our unprotected flanks. I see. Even though those are just your suspicions, I admit that this seems like the most logical possibility. But that doesn't change the fact that if we'll allow Yanari to reach Zrakan space, we would put our Shalani allies in grave danger. Unfortunately, Commodore, we do not take responsibility for actions of our allies. The Shalani have been informed about Yanari fleets, but what will they do with that knowledge is only their decision. So, the Commonwealth would rather let our comrades commit suicide than take any initiative and help them. I wish I knew that before we became part of your country. We can argue about consequences of this order later, Commodore. For now, I just wanted to make sure that none of you will break formation and attack. Last thing we need now is to play right into Yanari hands. So, is everything clear? Good. Dismissed. That went better than expected, Admiral, but didn't you say that you wanted to be honest with your officers? Honesty is a double-edged sword, number 1. In right circumstances, it can motivate and inspire soldiers, but in others it can completely dissolve their morale. They know enough, for now. They know about possible ambush, and they know that we foiled it thanks to ever-vigilant and brilliant Phalangites. What they don't need to know is that over the last year we've been fed false information, and that our own people are responsible for it. Could you imagine the paranoia that would grip this fleet if that information was made public? No, number 1, we can't let word about these sleeper agents spread. We can just hope that CDI can root them out before they carry out their orders. Hello there! Welcome back to Second Chance, where, after a short chase, our navy, Task Force Manticore, managed to catch up to the force of Yannari League in Chetras system, home of our Queptilian allies. But, as you might have heard in the opening sequence, this will unfortunately not be the day where we engage our enemies in a decisive battle. Instead, our fleet will move into the orbit of New Beginning to ensure Yannari won't be able to attack it, should they suddenly change their plans. And the reason for that move is very simple. To put it bluntly, our enemies almost managed to lure us into a trap. They sent the main body of their fleet ahead, looking deceptively weaker than our own force, but as attention of our military was focused on that main force, two more battle groups managed to sneak right into our territory, one of them belonging to Yannari as well, while the other seems to be the main force of Kingdom of Yadra. And although these smaller fleets aren't that powerful, when combined with that main Yannari force, they are more than a match for our own navy. So, if Admiral Ibrahim went through with her original plan of intercepting the enemy in Chetras, she would quickly find herself outnumbered and outgunned, as trailing enemy ships would just jump into the system and join the fight, swinging the balance in Yannari favor. Luckily, operators of our long-range sensors managed to spot those fleets in time, which means that we can now, narrowly, escape the trap. And, even better, we can spring one of our own. See, the original plan of our enemies is, from what we can tell from intercepted signals, to go right into the middle of Zrakan space, where our Shalani allies are besieging one of the worlds belonging to the Union. But because their fleets are not moving together, our foes have to make their jumps separately, even more so because Yadrans are actually using different method of travel than Yannari. While the slavers use warp drives and jump from system to system, servants of the Empress travel via wormholes, same as us, and by the way, you might have noticed there that they somehow managed to deploy several hidden wormhole stations right into the middle of our territory. Now, how they did this we do not know, but we'll have to do something about that sooner rather than later to prevent at least one of our opponents from freely moving through our space. But back to our plan. At first, Admiral Ibrahim believed that enemy plan to move into Zrakan space was just a misinformation fed to us in hopes of luring our navy into that trap, but now it seems that both our reptilian enemies are really committed to it, as their fleets began plotting course to the next system closer to Zrakan borders. But here's the thing, they are all preparing to jump separately, which means that the fleet that was there earlier is already on the way, while two that arrived later will now have to spend several days, maybe even up to 2 weeks, venting their drive course and calculating new trajectory. And that, of course, makes them extremely vulnerable to attack, because they're no longer protected by the main force. So, in the orbit of Queptilian homeworld, Admiral Ibrahim called all her captains and immediately ordered them to attack, because time is key in this situation. Not only our enemies will have a chance to escape, but the main Yannari fleet may also come back and turn the tables around if we wait for too long. More than that, our foes not only left their smaller battle groups behind, they also have their land forces there, practically undefended. So, if we'll manage to reverse that enemy trap, it will be a severe blow to them, and something that will certainly raise spirits of our people for the coming war. It's time for our first engagement against the Yannari. And very soon it starts in the usual way, with a barrage of missiles, kinetic projectiles and plasma fire. And while the engagement itself is not too interesting, since we have an overwhelming advantage, captains of Manticore gladly welcomed it. For the first time they face an enemy that, while bites back, shouldn't really cause us too much harm. Only thing is that, whether deliberately or by accident, that smaller Yannari fleet was actually positioned in such a way that we had to get through them first in order to get to the transport and Yadrans. And the slavers have actually used it to delay us. As our formation engaged them, their ships immediately began evasive maneuvers, and some of them even powered down their weapons to increase the effectiveness of their deflectors and engines. And because of that, they actually managed to delay us for a decent amount of time, so long in fact that Yadran fleet managed to open up a second wormhole and jumped away, before we were able to catch them. But we managed to completely wipe out that smaller force, and destruction of 9 corvettes, 1 cruiser and 1 support ship is not something to scoff at, even though it's maybe 5% of overall enemy strength. Still, it all adds up, and eliminating those 11 ships now will surely save some lives later. And to add to that, this small battle was the first one since Operation against Void Cloud in Clue System, that Chancellor Lin led so long ago, in which we haven't lost even a single ship or suffered a single fatal casualty. Granted, it was completely one-sided, but battles like that are important for morale nonetheless. And although we haven't managed to intercept Yadran Navy, we still get a silver lining: Yannari transport fleet. and as Manticore engaged it, we learned something very interesting, and a bit disturbing, about our enemies. See, while our transport ships are relatively straightforward, just a bunch of cryopods and a big engine, Yannari's so-called flesh harvesters are far more complex. For one, they are about 6 times larger than our transports, despite still carrying only about 1 million soldiers. The reason for that is simple. While we only use these ships to move our armies from point A to point B, Masters of the League also use them as mobile slave pens and markets. Once regular troops have disembarked, they would try to capture as many locals as possible and send them back to those ships, where they would await to be branded and processed and sent back to the League. That, paired with the fact that Yannari economy is completely dependent on slave labor, means that these transport ships are center points of all their military campaigns, so by catching them without escort we are able to greatly damage their prestige and disrupt both their internal and external operations. And, of course, prevent invasions, which is still the main positive. Unfortunately, because those ships are so important, they are also built to the highest standards, so much so that they are able to withstand as much damage as a cruiser, which means that, although they can't fight back, it still takes us a long time to wipe them out. Manticore managed to do it, of course, and eliminated around 6 million League soldiers in the process, but the delay caused by this turned out to be far more dangerous than we anticipated. Because, as it turned out, Yadran fleet had a different objective in mind. They moved with Yannari at first, for safety, but instead of following them into Zrakan space, they jumped straight into Bish system, home of our first habitat, the Inti Station. Problem is, Inti Station is completely undefended. Bish is right in the middle of our space, so when Phalanx Protocol allocated funds for defensive emplacements, it was put almost at the very end of the list, since no one expected our enemies could get there. Now, of course, we know that this assumption was wrong, but it is too late to prepare any additional defenses now, which means that Admiral Ibrahim had to make a decision. Either try to pursue the Yannari or defend Inti Station, and as you might expect, she picked the second option. Granted, the habitat could probably hold on for a while, since it's actually even more difficult to invade it than a regular planet. See, while regular invasion forces just land on the surface of the planets, preferably far away from enemy emplacements, in this case they would either be forced to use regular docking platforms, where they would be completely surrounded and probably slaughtered, or they would have to wait for their navy to open up some breaches in the outer layers of the station. And even then, attackers would be forced to fight in a deadly close-quarters combat against an enemy that knows the layout of the station infinitely better. So, if we had some regular troops on board, we could probably turn Inti Station into Yadran meat grinder, but with just local citizens and police force acting as defenders, it's clear that the station would eventually fall to any organized attack. But that is where Manticore comes in. Without even stopping for repairs, our fleet rushed into Bish system, and although they are too late to prevent Yadrans from bombarding the station, they can still stop the actual invasion. And in this case, the wormhole system itself was working in our favor. Because our enemies only had one station within range, they could only move their fleets one at a time, so while their main navy is already in position, their ground troops are still in transit, and so are their escorts. That enabled Manticore to intercept Yadran forces piece by piece. You can see here we managed to jump right on top of a battle cruiser and a destroyer and took them out without trouble. And a few days later, our leading ships close to effective combat range and engaged Yadran blockade, which, as you might expect, wasn't exactly too difficult. Our dragon-like enemies were still unable to rebuild their power after the defeat against the Billion Minds, and perhaps most importantly, the loss of their homeworld, first to drones and then to us, left them without main capital shipyard, and as a result, their fleet was very small and composed mostly of corvettes, with only 4 capital ships leading it. So by destroying that battle cruiser a few days earlier, we actually dealt a considerable damage to their overall military power. But still, instead of surrendering or running away, servants of the Empress powered their weapons and began a hopeless battle against Manticore, perhaps to buy their Yannari allies enough time to enact their mysterious plan in Zrakan space. But, as expected, the battle was rather one-sided. Our fleet managed to destroy Yadran flagship within minutes, and although enemy crews did their best, nevertheless, they really couldn't survive the overwhelming amount of firepower we threw at them. Within 20 minutes, almost entirety of their fleet was wiped out, and soon their remaining ships transferred all power to the engines, hoping to outrun our navy and run away. But they failed, and soon we catched up to them and took them out one by one, finishing off the last remnants of the once powerful Yadron fleet. So, another victory for us, but although it was a decisive one, it was sadly not flawless. Shortly before Yadrons broke their ranks, captain of one of their cruisers went for a suicide ramming maneuver against one of our support ships. Our vessel managed to get away, barely, but its escorting corvette, CSV Javelin, was taken completely by surprise and was rammed by enemy ship 4 times its size, an attack that just torn our small ships to pieces. Still, it is a single ship lost on our side and 41 on Yadron, not a bad exchange, especially considering that we managed to also take out enemy wormhole generator and save Inti Station. But the lesson has been learned. No matter how safe we think our systems may be, they still need to be defended to prevent surprises like this one. As soon as our construction vessels are available, they will have to start building defenses around Inti, because next time our navy may not be around to save the day. Speaking of saving the day, that siege our Shalani allies were conducting in Zrakan-controlled Bitfox system just got a bit more complicated because that Yanari navy we left through just arrived on the scene, and as you can clearly see, it is more than a match for our horse-like comrades. We tried to warn them about this fleet before, several times in fact, but Shalani were confident that they're up to the challenge, and for a moment there it seemed like they really wanted to stay in the orbit of that Zrakan world, but once their commanders saw Yanari fleet up close, they immediately realized that maybe discretion is better part of valor, called off the siege and ordered full retreat. And a good thing they did, because while they surely could engage our enemies and deal quite a lot of damage to them, there simply is no point for them to fight in a losing battle. As it stands, it almost looks like Shalani planned this entire operation from the beginning, because once you look at it from the outside, their seemingly dangerous maneuver will actually benefit our alliance more than our enemies. By presenting themselves as an easy target, Shalani Navy enabled us to attack smaller enemy units separately, weakening our foes before the deciding battle. More than that, by luring main Yanari fleet into the far corner of Zrakan space, the Coalition bought us time we need to construct more defenses, and finally, it completely exposed our foes to counterattack. With Yadran and Zrakan fleets gone, and with Yanari forces being busy in the east, there is no one between us and Reptilian core planets. So, as soon as we're able, we should start preparing a raiding force. If we could strike Yanari dockyards while their fleet is still away, we could remove their ability to wage war effectively. And also, it seems that we owe Shalani Coalition an apology. Before their retreat, we thought they were completely detached from reality and downright suicidal. Turns out, they're smarter than anyone, us or our enemies, expected. With allies like that, victory is just a matter of time. That time is still a long way off, unfortunately, and before we end this war, one way or another, we're going to have to deal with some internal issues. See, before the war, when our fleet was safely stationed at Arvo and Ortus, it was relatively cheap to maintain, but now, with all the action it sees, keeping Manticore operational is once again proving to be a drain on our economy, so much so that our finances are once again in the red, and although we built a decent reserve before the war, the last thing we want is to steadily lose credits. We may be afloat now, sure, but a single random crisis may tip our economy over the edge, and in current situation it would be best to be safe rather than sorry. So, in order to improve our finances, Innovation Party decided to re-specialize our freshly saved Inti habitat and turn it into a trade station. Now, some may say that a station that has just been bombarded is not exactly the best place to do your shopping, but with Phalanx builders already on the way to reinforce the system, the station should be safe from any further attacks. Besides, if our enemies can attack Inti, they can attack any other planet, but at least our habitat is far better suited to act as a trade hub than any other of our colonies. For one, it's already one of our main moneymakers, since it's essentially a huge power plant. Next, it's actually far easier and cheaper to reach it than any of our other planets, because you don't have to waste fuel on expensive atmospheric flights. And finally, conducting business with foreign traders there may actually increase our prestige in the galaxy, because, for all we can tell, Inti Station is one of a kind. As of today, no other nation managed to construct such an ambitious project, so it will surely impress foreign merchants. But there is also another hidden reason behind this. Up until now, Commonwealth usually dealt with economic problems in a single way, by selling off our technology to anyone who was interested. But no longer. Truth is, while we do not trade with questionable nations like Yanari or Fafsim, others, including our allies, do. So if we sell our tech to the Alir, for example, there is a good chance that they will sell it to one of the militaristic regimes in the north, and said regimes will surely have no reservations to sell that tech to, say, Zrakan Union. So, in order to prevent situations like these, Commonwealth voted to no longer exchange our technology with other nations, including our closest allies, unless we can get similar access to their own research. That's it then. From this day forward, Commonwealth databanks are no longer a tradable commodity. Once all research agreements that are already in effect will run their course, there won't be any new ones, unless our own researchers can benefit from it. If the galaxy is so willing to use our knowledge against us, then we will just have to hoard it all for ourselves.
Project concluded.
Sorry for being late, Prime Minister. I was preparing my election speech and completely lost all sense of space and time. I think I may actually be worse than my predecessor when it comes to writing them. Believe me, you're not. Rahoslav might have been a decent politician, but he couldn't stop himself from pouring ridiculous amounts of pathos into every sentence, which is why he had people who wrote those speeches for him, and you should too. And considering that all pre-election polls are overwhelmingly in your favor, I don't even know why you bother. Our people need their famous admiral now more than ever. Which is why I try to respect their trust by writing my own speeches. Not to mention that when I try to write, I stop thinking about the war. I see. That's actually a better answer than I expected. But regardless, that's not why I called you here. Have you been scanned on your way in? Yes, 3 times to be precise. What even is this place? I heard about official government bunkers, but this seems different, older. Because almost no one knows about this place, not even people in the government. This was actually Tessa's idea. He bought this lab complex about 40 years ago and hired some trusted people from Counterintelligence Division to turn it into the most secure place on Ortus, or maybe even entire Commonwealth. The chance of our conversation being intercepted is essentially zero. Aside from that, there are enough supplies here to last for a century, and the whole complex is completely masked from all forms of scanning. Unless you know about this place, finding it on your own is nearly impossible. Also, it's a symbol of our progress. About 60 years ago, in this very room we're sitting in right now, humanity almost destroyed the world. Or, well, part of humanity. A single man, to be precise. Care to elaborate on that? Of course. Around 2201, Dr. Roman Poniewski used this facility to create first artificial wormhole, not just within gravity well of a planet, underground. One tiniest mistake in his calculations and whole Ortus would have been turned into rubble. He hoped that being this far underground would prevent a catastrophe should things go wrong, and was wrong, of course. Fortunately, our lucky stars were watching over us. And speaking of luck, let us get to the matter at hand. Our counterintelligence division hit a breakthrough in the saboteur case. That's one of the things I tried to not think about. It's one thing to fight an enemy who stands in front of you, but something far worse when said enemy is hiding on your side. But let me guess, all those Aramathi slaves we liberated from the camps were programmed there to act as Zrakan sleeper agents, am I correct? If only things were so easy, Chancellor. Truth is, Aramathi had nothing to do with it. We would have known if even a single one of those freed prisoners was up to no good. I know you are a good bureaucrat, but surely even you can't keep an eye on all of our citizens. Actually, I can, at least in this case. As you remember, when we liberated them, they all had to undergo a medical procedure. Back then we were expecting Zrakan to try and smuggle bioweapons inside their bodies. Anyway, we used that procedure as cover to implant tracking devices into the Aramathi. All of them. Were you even thinking about consequences of such move, Ishi? Can you imagine the scandal that would happen if someone found out about those trackers? They wouldn't. The implants were tailored specifically to blend in with Aramathi biology, so no conventional scan would find them. More than that, should they detect any sign of outside tampering, these trackers were designed to dissolve in Aramathi intestines without leaving a trace. Like with this bunker, no one would be able to find them without knowing what to look for. Understood. Then, if Aramathi are not responsible for all those acts of sabotage across the Commonwealth, then who is? That's the worst part, Chancellor. We are. The CID cross-referenced data from all sites of sabotage we've uncovered so far. Derelict ships, abandoned facilities and the like. In 100% of cases, the perpetrator was a human. You have to be kidding me. Are you saying that some of our people are actually walking against us, side by side with aliens who want to either kill or enslave them? Sounds improbable, right? But it's true. At first we simply assumed that greed was the deciding factor here, as usually was the case throughout history. But then CID agents managed to capture several spies red-handed, and the interrogation proved to be enlightening. All captured agents showed no signs of regret or remorse for their actions. All of them firmly believed their actions were justified, and all of them claimed that they acted in the name of everlasting light. Zrakan religion, so it seems they actually managed to convert some of our people with their endless transmissions. I never thought anyone would be foolish enough to actually believe it. And so did we. But while Zrakan religion is to blame here, it may not actually be the main source of our problems. See, when CID captured several spies, we started looking for a pattern, something to tell us just how exactly Zrakan managed to brainwash our people. At first, nothing made sense. All these spies were random citizens, and some of them never even ventured close to Zrakan space. But when we were almost ready to give up, medical scans picked up something interesting. All of the agents were psionically active, but unaware of their abilities. So, the pod plants can somehow manipulate our psionics? That's not a good information, is she? Do we know how to reverse it, or prevent it from ever happening in the future? No, we don't even know how they're doing it, which is why I called you here. Up until now, psionically active humans were kept on the fringes of our society. They were acknowledged, but we paid them little mind, and never really worked to uncover the full potential of their abilities. That needs to change, if only to ensure our enemies can't manipulate our people from behind the scenes. And as a first step of that plan, I decided to organize a special task force to take over this investigation. A unit made out of people who know what they're dealing with. The dossiers are right here. All I need is your signature. Let me see first. Mostly military people, I see. And a few eggheads and... yes, codename Queen. If anyone can get to the bottom of it, it's her. Very well, here's my signature. Call her up as fast as you can and get her to work. The sooner we deal with those spies, the better. But don't think I forgot about those tracking chips, Prime Minister. As soon as this war is over, we're going to have a serious talk about it. Next, there was a matter of elections. It may seem that Chancellor Lin claimed her office only recently, but it's already been a whole decade, so it was time for our people to vote once again. However, with all that's been happening lately, the war, enemy incursions into our space, and rumors about enemy agents infiltrating our society, the campaign was completely dominated by militaristic rhetoric. And, as our political observers expected, people of the Commonwealth turned to the candidate who already proved time and again to be a reliable officer as well as politician, and as campaign started, all polls indicated that Chancellor Xu Lin would be re-elected for a second time, as no other candidate even came close to her. So, no surprises there, but one thing that did surprise our people was just how quickly our new Queptilian citizens entered our political scene. Just a few months after we inducted them into Commonwealth, a group of politicians moved from New Beginning to Ortus, and, under leadership of Governor Stalkov Maroon, they organized themselves into yet another faction. And, as you can see, said faction is not exactly happy. For one, they don't like the fact that their planet is governed by an alien. Sure, Governor Sakleen may be a perfect fit for the job, but those Queptilians would rather see one of their own in charge of their homeworld, which is understandable. Overall, though, they simply wish to have more influence within the Commonwealth. But of course that is something they need to earn first. Let's just hope they won't cause us any trouble. Soon though, all political matters have been moved aside, because our long-range monitoring stations picked up Yanari fleet once again. It seems that our crocodile friends finished whatever business they had within Zrakan space and went on the offensive once again. And this time their objective was a bit more tangible, at least from the data we managed to intercept. The Yanari fleet was on its way towards Minerva, formerly known as Ramas II, the planet that was home to gigantic arachnids the size of a bear, and, recently, one of our major research outposts. Over the last few years, an entire city-sized facility was constructed on Minerva's northern pole, dedicated to a singular thing: cloning. Until recently, that cloning was mostly restricted to research and medical purposes, and all rumors that Commonwealth use it to synthesize food are nothing nothing but outright lies, but ever since the war began, a large portion of our land officers began to argue that this technology could be used for military gain, namely by creating cloned soldiers that would be specifically trained for combat, and combat alone. As you might expect though, this issue was a bit more complicated. Those who supported it claimed that clones would be, in purpose, practically the same as our battle droids, but much cheaper and easier to field. Sure, they may not be as resilient as robots, but they would have the advantage of organic brain, which is far better suited to ever-changing battlefield. However, a large group of our citizens opposed the project on moral grounds. After all, they argued, if a clone has an organic brain, then it is a sentient, thinking, living being, and treating such being as a meat shield is just wrong. Now, under normal circumstances, that debate would probably last for years, maybe even decades, since both sides presented many valid arguments, but with war still undecided, pragmatism once again overcame morality, and an emergency law was passed that turned Minervan cloning vats into a military facility with one sole purpose: creating a clone army for the Commonwealth. The current goal is to create 6 million clone troopers, 3 million human clones and 3 million Utkavongo clones. And although that second part may seem odd, given peaceful nature of our Kithri lookalikes, there is a very good reason for it. See, while Utkavongo society may be peaceful, their biology is anything but. Millions of years ago, these fungoids evolved as top predators on their homeworld. Those instincts are still there within their DNA, and without their society to temper them, our Utkavongo clones will be far better suited for combat than any of our other soldiers. So, it is no wonder that this planet is the goal of Yannari invasion, for several reasons. For one, they probably want to prevent us from building an army of cloned soldiers that could swarm their defenses. And secondly, taking over that facility would greatly benefit Yannari economy. As we know, their nation is built on slave labor, but slaves are not infinite. To get more of them, or to even keep their population on the same level, you either need to breed the existing ones, which is a time-consuming process, or you need to find them abroad, whether by raiding or trade. But now, imagine what Yannari could do with access to cloning technology. They could create billions of expendable slaves to fuel their economy and completely overwhelm all of their rivals, including us. So, all the more reason for us to work extra hard to defend Rama's system. There's not much we can do though, aside from just moving Manticore to the system and digging in. Ramas has been fortified in recent years, but there's no time to build any additional defenses since, as you can see, the Yannari are already on their way, conveniently redirected by our FTL snare, which should cause them to arrive closer to the system's star. Other than that, we can only order full civilian evacuation, an order that, as you can see, was ignored by some of the more suicidal of our citizens, and place Manticore in a good position to intercept. And then wait, though knowing Admiral Ibrahim, she's going to have her crews constantly check and recheck everything, from armor plating to heat sinks, to make sure that our fleet is ready for the coming battle. And here they are, right where we expected them. And, exactly as with Zrakan Radiant Host, being pulled out of warp speed by our interdictor was such a strain on Yannari engines that they overheated within seconds of entering the system, which means that malevolent Star Hunters are now trapped. Until they manage to vent their engines, which is not an easy task during combat, they won't be able to get away. So we now have a chance to deal a crippling or potentially even completely decisive blow to leaders of enemy coalition against us. But that's not the only advantage we had. As you could have seen there, as soon as Yannari spotted our fleet, they fired a blinding barrage of missiles at us. Not even half of those missiles reached their intended targets though, as our carriers and corvettes simply knocked them out of the sky with their point defense cannons. And in the middle of this light show, pilots of our small PD fighters chased enemy fission rockets as well, while their comrades in fighters and bombers charged towards enemy formation, blasting highway to the danger zone at full volume and preparing a devastating payload of antimatter bombs. But, despite their eagerness, pilots of our strike craft had a tough battle ahead of them. As you can see in the distance, some Yannari vessels were equipped with point defense cannons as well, slightly less efficient model than the ones we use, but dangerous nonetheless. And soon, our pilots realized that while these guns may be completely useless against larger ships, they are perfect when it comes to taking out small mobile targets, like, for example, squadrons of pesky bombers. That could have spelled doom for our strike craft, but fortunately, only a handful of Yannari ships were actually equipped with PD guns, which forced them to prioritize their targets. And because we have missiles on our own, Yannari gunners had a choice: target incoming antimatter counter rockets or try to pick off our fighters and bombers. Luckily for us, they focused on missiles, so while our pilots still suffered some losses in this fight, they were nowhere near as high as they could have been. Still, as you can clearly see, the battle turned in our favor very quickly, despite our enemies being very powerful on paper. Thing is, Yannari's strength is extremely situational. Around 90% weapons in their fleet are missile launchers, which we can easily counter thanks to our numerous PD guns. Sure, we can't counter them all, but as long as we stay alive, this battle will only get easier, because every enemy ship we take down means less rockets coming our way. In short, we can slowly whittle Yannari fleet down, while preventing them from causing any significant damage to us. Still though, it doesn't mean we're invincible here. For one, our enemies are aware that missiles are best used to take out smaller, more maneuverable ships like corvettes, and they tried to focus them down. And not even our fastest ship can outrun a swarm of rockets, so soon we started to take losses among our smallest vessels. Also, captains of several of our destroyers got too enthusiastic and overextended their ships, putting them out of range of defensive fire provided by our carriers. Even worse, a fleet of terrified civilians flight right through the middle of combat zone, which forced many of our gunners to hold fire. But all that didn't change the end result. Despite taking some losses, Task Force Manticore managed to beat Malevolent Star Hunters back, but unlike with the Radiant Host, it was not a complete victory. Despite all our efforts, Yannari proved to be quite good tacticians, and when they realized that they can't win this fight, they backed off and kept distance long enough to fully recharge their engines, which enabled 10 of their cruisers to escape. Now, on their own, these ships shouldn't cause us too much trouble, but this number of operational capital ships can still serve as a decent backbone for defensive operations or a raiding fleet. So, the Yannari have been defeated, and although they are not yet broken, this battle should keep them away from mounting any kind of offensive anytime soon, especially since our Shalani allies have just arrived to support our operations, and their presence should more than cover the loss of 20 of our ships in this battle. That's it then, our home turf has been secured. 3 of our enemies have tried to attack us, and 3 of them failed. Now, it's finally time to bring the fight to them. So, with all threats to our territory neutralized, or at least delayed, Commonwealth decided to pour all its resources into mounting a counterattack. But we're not going to leave anything to chance here, so once again our delegates have approached some of our allies in hopes of establishing a trade deal. Now, I'm not sure if it was shown in previous episodes, but over the last 2 decades, some of our planetary government invested in various luxury goods factories that produced everything you could imagine, from personalized cruise ships to organic pocket watches. At first, those goods were mostly produced for our domestic market, and were a proof of sorts that our society was no longer in its frontier pioneering phase, because we could afford to spend time, money and resources on making goods that were not purely practical. Anyway, thanks to our technological superiority, these luxuries quickly became one of the more sought-after commodities on various galactic markets, and merchants from all across the stars came into Commonwealth to acquire them, and sell them back home for an extensive price. So, when the Council realized that, they immediately contacted some of our closest allies, like Alir, and proposed an official deal. And as you can see, our friends were willing to pay extraordinary amount of resources just to get their appendages on a large number of our high-quality products. Next, we contacted the Xia Compact to the north, and were completely surprised when we learned that the representative of the government turned out to be not one of the mantis-like aliens, but an Aramathi. Turns out that after we have liberated them, a large number of Aramathi decided to leave their worlds, and many of them settled on cold planets belonging to Xia Compact, where they quickly adapted to new conditions. In fact, they adapted so well, and became so important part of the nation, that one of them was actually elected as president, which makes Xia Compact the first country on galactic scene where its leader is not a member of a dominant species, a true proof of Xia tolerance if we ever needed any. There's even a significant human presence within the Compact, and it has been there for quite a while now, which is proved by the fact that human citizens there have not undergone our genetic therapy that rid our own people of their biological shortcomings. But regardless, it is good to know that in this chaotic galaxy, at least some of our neighbors are decent people. Now, if they could only teach this level of tolerance to, say, Yannari or the Zrakan, the galaxy would have been a better place, or at least a bit more peaceful. Sadly though, we are not living in that peaceful world. Trade may help us tighten bonds between our allies and gather more resources for our armed forces, but it will not solve all our problems. Once all is said and done, it will be up to our military, fleet and army to secure our peace. And, as you can see, we're already in the process of doing just that. But, despite what many outside observers expected, our first move against our enemies is not directed at Yennari League or even Zraken Union, nations who caused us most trouble in recent years, but at Kingdom of Yadra, namely their new capital, Falka Boss, located in Zamathon system. Now, this decision came as a surprise to our citizens, who vocally demanded to take action against Yennari slavers, but military command decided to approach this problem in the most pragmatic way possible. The Yadrans are, for all we know, the weakest link of enemy alliance. Their fleet has been wiped out, their shipyards are unable to build new capital ships, and their society is currently in the middle of a revolution. Once we add all those issues, it becomes obvious that we can take Yadrans out of this war in one swift move. More importantly, Zamathon system was actually in our sights for quite a long time. As you may remember, when Yadrans settled it, it enabled them to lay claim to several other very promising systems nearby, like Bera or Fulaz. So, by capturing Zamathon, we could not only seize second Yadran capital, a move that will surely demoralize their society, but also secure those border systems and ensure our dominance there. And so, our armed forces began full mobilization. Once Manticore finished all the repairs after Battle of Minerva, they set course for Zamathon, took out Orbital Station, and last remaining Yadran capital shipyard, and began bombarding enemy fortifications. Once our fleet secured the way, they gave all clear to our armed forces, and soon army of General Telavin, our 12 million strong corps of infantry, boarded the cryotransport and started moving towards Zamathon. Sadly, mechanized command of General Branitsky was still grounded. Despite the fact that citizens of Yadrani lived under our rule for quite a long time now, most of them still despised us, and by moving Branitsky's forces away, we would just give them a perfect opportunity to start a rebellion. But Telavin and his regulars won't be alone in this fight. Supporting them will be our freshly recruited, or well created, corps of clone soldiers, exactly 6 million of them, supported by additional 200,000 combat mechs from Foundries of Ortis. An impressive force to be sure, but even with full support of our fleet, their job won't be an easy one, as there are over 20 million Yadran defenders waiting for them on Falka Boss. And we're talking here only about regular troops. Who knows how many militiamen this new Empress will be able to rally under her banners. But even if she rallies all of them, it's not going to stop us. With our fleet in full control of the orbit, Yadrans have no place to escape, and after a few weeks of devastating bombardment, also nowhere to hide. And so, in early days of 2264, first Commonwealth transports began their orbital descent. Above them, Task Force Manticore focused all its firepower to ensure that every Yadran soldier within 50 kilometers of designated landing zones would be turned into dust. But, as our first dropships entered atmosphere, a message reached our fleet. In the north, beyond Yadran borders, our allies from Utkavongo states have noticed ships moving into their territory from the east. For a day or two, they hoped that maybe, just maybe, these ships were some refugees or lost traders, but now, week after spotting them, there was no denying the truth. The Billion Mind was on the warpath once again, and once more their ships charged into territory of our allies, pouring hundreds of thousands of mindless, ravenous drones onto any inhabited planet they could reach. Somehow, despite all recent setbacks, the Billion Mind managed to rebuild and even expand its power, and the message from our Utkavongo allies was clear. They were already embroiled in a war on two fronts. In the north, they tried to help Zenak Forge survive invasion of bloodthirsty Dis berserkers. In the south, they raid Yadran border on our behest, but with third enemy coming right for them, their chances of survival are very slim, and they need help. Our help. And so, as first of our clone troopers landed on the surface of Falka Boss, far away from them, on Ortus, leaders of the Commonwealth prepared an official response. We will help our Fangoid allies, no matter what. Only one question remained, however. How are we going to do this? Okay, everything checks out. Welcome to the army, soldier. You'll begin your training tomorrow, but for now just proceed through the red door where Quartermaster will take care of you. Send in the next one. Good day. Now if you could just stand over there. Okay, good. Now let's begin. What is your name, recruit? My name is CT238-JC. Correct. And where do you come from? VAT 74, Building C, level -19. Very good. And what is your purpose here? My purpose is to follow clone trooper military protocol and protect citizens and interests of Commonwealth with all my skills and life if necessary. Splendid. I see you're going to be a perfect addition to our army. From what I can see, your medical report is good as well. Okay, everything checks out. Welcome to the army, soldier. You'll begin your training tomorrow, but for now just proceed through the red door, where the quartermaster will take care of you. Send in the next one. Good day. Now, if you could just stand over there. Okay, good. Now let's begin. What is your name, recruit? My name? Yes, recruit. It shouldn't be too hard to remember. I think my name is Jonathan McNair, Corporal of Commonwealth's 1st Mech Division. Interesting. And where do you come from? Ortus, I think. I can't really seem to remember anything. Look, can you tell me what's going on here? I remember that me and Milans landed on Yadrani and there was this huge battle and an explosion, I think. But I can't seem to recall anything after that. Is this a hospital? Yes, it is a hospital, so to speak. I think I know what the problem is, soldier. There must have been some unfortunate mix-up with the paperwork. Would you kindly step through the green door? There are officers there that will straighten everything up. Sure, Doc. Thanks. No problem, soldier. Hold the line for a second back there. So, now you saw it with your own eyes, Professor. Anomalies like this one have been happening ever since we began this project, and despite all our efforts, we still can't tell why. I see. Quite exciting, wouldn't you say? According to all our knowledge, something like that simply shouldn't happen, and yet it seems that memories of original template keep resurfacing within certain clones. What's the tendency there, Doctor? If we factor in this one, then it will be 1 in 27,000. Doesn't seem like much, but considering that we grow them in millions here, we end up with quite a significant number of these abnormals. So significant that their presence may soon become difficult to hide. Do you follow the procedure? Of course, every anomalous clone is removed from the group, processed, and its biological material is returned to the vat, but that processing takes special equipment, time, and various chemicals that shouldn't really be present in this facility. It becomes increasingly difficult to hide all this in paperwork. One overly ambitious official could expose and ruin this entire operation. Don't worry about government, Doctor. Ishii knows about this place and will keep all inspectors off your back. Instead, we should focus on those resurfacing memories and find out what causes them. Believe me, Professor Tanwa, we tried, but it is as you said, these memories should not be there. When the clones are created, their brains are blank slates which we program with Clone Trooper protocol. At first we thought that there was some malfunction hidden in the protocol itself, but we checked everything dozens of times and found no issue. Next we suspected some internal sabotage, but security ruled that out as well. Then we thought that maybe those abnormal clones had some biological defect, but all scans showed that they were perfect copies, same as operational ones. We're out of ideas here. So it would seem. Exhilarating feeling, is it not? To know that answer is out there, probably within our reach. We just have to be a bit smarter to spot it. Perhaps we should revisit that old theory about genetic memories. But I took too much of your time already. Continue with your work, but if it's not a problem, I'd like you to send me a couple of these clones. 10 of them would do, and make sure at least 2 of them would be abnormals. Of course, Professor. We'll have them shipped at the next rotation. Alright, Captain, escort Professor Tanwa back to the surface. Restart the line.